Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
My name is Frank Silvestri. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not a Canadian. And Philly's really close to New Jersey, by the way. And I'm here to talk to you about why I am a Patreon supporter of Vish Khanna's Creative Control podcast, the unique long-form exploration of music, comedy, art, geography, and so much more. Vish is an incredible interviewer who has a charming, disarming, funny, reverently irreverent style, which feels a lot more like a conversation with friends than a podcast interview. These conversations have included talking to people like Jeff Tweedy, Nels Klein, Ira Kaplan, Dan Romano, Carson McHone, the White Hot Lung, Juliana Rialino, and one of my all-time favorites, the Sadies. So if you're like me and you find these kind of conversations vital, essential, and important, I hope you'll join me in supporting Creative Control on Patreon.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today.
Creative Control with Vish Khanna.
Stephen Hyden is an esteemed author, podcaster, and music and cultural critic, currently based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Originally from Wisconsin, Hyden is presently the cultural critic at Uprocks. He co-hosts the IndieCast podcast with Ian Cohen and the Never Ending Stories Bob Dylan and the Never Ending Tour podcast with Jokermen. He has previously written for the New York Times Magazine, the Washington Post, Grantland, and the AV Club, among many others. And he has written 6 books to date about specific artists and also cultural phenomena. His latest book is a wonderful one called There Was Nothing You Could Do, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the U.S.A. and the End of the Heartland. It was published by Hachette Books on May 28, 2024, and it prompted Stephen to join me for a talk about the state of music and cultural criticism and what prompted him to first become a writer. How film critics have long had more cachet than music critics. The various and confusing ambiguities in the work and life of an American like Bruce Springsteen, how the boss rejected his most successful album and got lost in the 1990s, just as Nirvana were rejecting their own most successful album, why Springsteen's narrative voice became more inward, why he and America were never quite the same after Born in the USA, a fascinating alternate history of Bruce events, Stephen's tour dates, other future plans, and much more. A part of the Lionsgate Sound Network with the support of listeners like you who follow and subscribe to this listener-supported and donor-driven podcast. Spread the word about it, leave nice reviews and ratings on your podcast platform, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, which is the primary and most reliable way for podcasters like me to make a living, and where a monthly subscription of $6 American or its currency equivalent means you can access every single episode of this show in its entirety, which is not the case without that subscription. Indeed, if you're listening to this and you're a Patreon subscriber, thank you so much. You're about to hear the entire conversation I had with Stephen Hyden. If you're not currently a subscriber, you will only hear an excerpt, but you can become a subscriber. To learn more, please, if you can, visit patreon.com/Creative Control. Thank you so much. Plus, in-kind support from independent businesses like Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario. This is episode 883 of Creative Control, featuring the lovely and talented Stephen Hyden with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Please enjoy this excerpt from our conversation, and to hear the whole thing, again, subscribe to the show at patreon.com/creativecontrol. Can you illuminate, for those who maybe aren't familiar with the lyrics as much as they are the sound of Born in the USA? And I would just I'll characterize them briefly as, and reductively as, generally fairly upbeat music. But then the more you, like, the lyrics fly by sometimes because of Bruce's delivery and phrasing. But the more you delve into every song, I think, on this album, you realize there's a real darkness and alienation in his narrative voice here, and yet the packaging is set. What is it? 7 top 10 singles. Like, this was a pervasive album, and I just wonder if you can talk about that dichotomy in relation to America, perhaps, and a guy who clearly, I think it's safe to say, and I'm not his doctor, but I think grew up depressed. Grew up feeling alienated, unsure of himself, insecure, yet comes across completely confident and strong on stage, like a god. You describe him at a show you saw. And so does him as a person actually personify something about the kind of mood and tone of America, this strong but weak place?
Right.
That claims to be one longing for community, but is also kind of a loner. I don't know. There's just a lot going on there. And I wonder if you can talk about Born in the USA as in further detail for those who maybe haven't picked up on that. Again, sorry for the leading question, but I feel like that's all there.
No, I mean, that's an interesting idea, the contradictions of America.
Yeah.
Which is something that I write about in the book and wrestle with, especially at the end of the book, because I think Bruce Springsteen, he's been such a part of my life for almost my entire life. I read at the beginning about hearing this album when I was 6 years old and knowing about this record and it being one of the first records that I was aware of, you know, and look, we're around the same age, so I'm sure you have a similar experience with like Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Yeah.
That just being a record where even if you're a little kid, like you knew that record. It was just part of the atmosphere at the time. And yeah, I mean, the way I write about it is happy-sounding songs that are sad. There are tons of those songs on Born in the USA. And that's not a songwriting formula that's unique to Bruce. Like, a lot of songwriters have done that thing, like where they have like a peppy or like a beautiful melody, and then they have some lyric that is in some way subverting the music.
Well, like Billie Jean, for example, by Michael Jackson is
Billie Jean,
really ridiculous if you dial into the fact that he's singing about whatever, paternity and deceit on some level, sex, really, and how sex is weaponized. And then on Born in the USA, which I'd done a lot of research, had written extensively about Bruce in the past, but you're reminding me about what Working on the Highway is actually about. It's a guy on a prison line for, sorry, when you say this, and I couldn't remember if Bruce talked about this, is it truly a song about someone committing statutory rape? I'll bring that up right now. I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't say the age of the girl, but it's implied that she's underage. And it's hard to explain why else this guy would be in jail. It doesn't appear that he's committed any other crime. So yeah, it's not spelled out explicitly.
Yeah.
But it definitely is leading you in that direction. And, Bruce really hit upon this formula a couple albums earlier with Hungry Heart, which was his first top 5 single, big song from the river. You hear that song and it's this joyous, beautiful, sing-along rock anthem. And then you listen to the words and it's about this deadbeat guy who leaves his family behind, and he is expressing that in a way that almost makes him seem like a sociopath. Like, he has no real remorse about this at all. So that was, I think, Bruce hitting upon that formula pretty early on, and then being like, okay, I can do this with Born in the USA. I mean, the title track is obviously the most notorious example of this because, lyrically it's a song about this Vietnam veteran who's disaffected. He's been essentially thrown away by his country, and he's still claiming his citizenship. But people hear that song and they think it's just like this great pro-America song. And that's because they listen to the chorus, which is very rousing and fist-pumping. And on the Born in the USA tour, Bruce would play that in front of the American flag, So it wasn't outrageous that people misinterpreted that song, but it definitely was not heard in the, I guess, more nuanced way that it's presented. I mean, Glory Days is another song like that. I feel like that's a song that a lot of people hear, and it's just like, oh, this is just like a dumb,
oh my God,
song about a guy being nostalgic. And it's about the opposite of that. It's about the emptiness of nostalgia and like how, you're doomed to eventually be an old man sitting on a bar stool just talking about the good times you had a long time ago. To me, like that kind of songwriting approach, it adds richness to a song. It ensures that you can hear it multiple times and take different meanings from it, and different people can take different meanings from it. And I think that really adds to the quality of a song. Of course, it also adds to the confusion of a song, and it can cause people to maybe attach certain things to your art that you wouldn't want them to. And that is certainly part of the Born in the USA story as well for Bruce Springsteen. I write about this in the book, but I mean, if you read Bruce's memoir, Born to Run, or there's a book he put out in the late 80s of song lyrics called Songs, where he writes a bit about each album, he's very ambivalent about this record. He's called it a grab bag of songs. He's expressed some regret about maybe going a little bit too far into the pop world with this record.
Particularly Dancing in the Dark, yeah.
Dancing in the Dark. But, there's songs like Cover Me, too, and even like I'm on Fire, which is obviously a great song, but, very much like a mid-'80s sounding pop song.
Sort of.
And
how many songs?
Sort of.
Sorry. I just think of, like just the lyrics about cutting a 6-inch valley through the middle of your skull. Like,
right. Again, lyrically, it's very dark. But again, like if you just listen to the music, it's understandable like why that became a big hit.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a great piece of music that is very much, I think, a piece with like other songs of that ilk that would have been popular at the time. The sort of sultry, sexy, slow ballad type song. And again, if you don't pay attention to the lyrics, it seems like just like a nice kind of like lusty song. But then, if you do pay attention to the lyrics, the sort of extra layer of anxiety and obsession that Bruce is writing about really comes to the fore. But, again, like with Born in the USA, like one thing that becomes clear over and over again is that a lot of people didn't listen to the lyrics. And they didn't care about like the deeper parts of that record. It was a phenomenon that people wanted to be a part of.
I think he was, and he was personally offended by people's superficial reading of his work, I think, on some level. I mean, I didn't mean to interject, but as you were speaking, I thought of something, and I wanted your perspective on it. Do you think that perhaps more than most artists of his caliber, Bruce Springsteen is particularly interested in the notion of things not being what they seem? If you think of a guy who came up in a family where he had a strained relationship with his father, his first manager, who I will name, Mike Appel, and him had a strained relationship. He trusted Mike, and it all came out in the wash through long litigation that Mike's contract, and I'm saying this not having been a part of it, allegedly, let's just cover my ass right now here. Allegedly, the contract was not sound, and Bruce had to wiggle out of that. The idea of America itself, being a promised land, but also not. Like, I just feel like and I know he has a real interest in cinema and storytelling generally. He does, I don't know, from my vantage point, and you think about Born in the USA and the way people processed, particularly the title song and some others, I just wonder if he's constantly meditating on this notion of like, it's not what you think it is. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of validity to that. I would also say that at this moment in time, that he was really interested in ambiguity, and that he didn't want to write message songs necessarily, and he didn't want to like just spell out what his idea might have been behind a song. That he wanted there to be shades of gray. You know, there's a song on Born in the USA called No Surrender that Bruce actually didn't want to put on the record because he thought it was too simplistic. And Steven Van Zandt talked him into putting it on the record because, from his view, that's a great song about believing in rock and roll. And he felt like that element needed to be on the album. And of course, Bruce relented and put it on the record. But I think that speaks to what Bruce's frame of mind was at that time. Like, there's some quote of his where he said that at this time he wanted to take a less heroic stance in his songs, as opposed to, you know, maybe something on Born to Run.
Yeah.
And if you look at the albums of, like, we'll just call it his golden period, you know, which would include Darkness on the Edge of Town, The River, and Nebraska, and Born in the USA. The characters on those records, they're not fully good and they're not fully bad. They're somewhere in the middle, and they're trying to figure it out. And they're often wrestling with the good and bad parts of themselves. And I think that is reflected in the musical presentation of a lot of these songs. You know, Born in the USA, for Bruce, I think, if you look at how he's played that live over the years, he has played it in the fashion in which it was originally written. It was originally written for Nebraska, and in that version, it's like a downbeat, bluesy dirge, basically. And it's pretty clear what the intentions of the lyrics are when you hear that arrangement of it. But for me, it doesn't have the power of the Born in the USA version. You know, that song has the critique, and it also has the celebration of America in the same song.
Yeah.
You know, like the guy in that song, he's not saying, I'm leaving America, or like I'm leaving the USA, or I don't care about the USA. He's saying, my country has done all these things to me, but I still am born in the USA. I'm still a part of this country. There's that sort of resolve to be part of the country, and also a rejection of the bad things that have happened at the same time. And that kind of like very nuanced presentation, you know, like a lot of people aren't going to get that. You know, you kind of need like a special attentive listener to understand that. Unfortunately, Bruce has a lot of those listeners, but you know, if you sell 30 million copies worldwide, 30 million people aren't going to listen to you that closely. You know, that is the Faustian bargain of becoming that popular. You don't always get the fans that you think you would want.
Hey, thanks for listening to Creative Control, as always. As you may have heard me mention, I recently lost my day job, and I've had a few conversations with people since who've said, you had a day job? I thought your podcast was your day job. When I explained why it hasn't been my day job to a friend, he suggested I should share some of this information with people like you listening right now. So, in short, unless they have some giant exclusive $1 million contract, podcasters are not paid to make stuff by companies like Apple and Spotify. Podcasters do not make any money from streaming royalties. Ad revenue is dependent on a certain threshold of downloads each month, and even if your show is accessed 30,000 times a month, the income you get is actually really minimal. So podcasters like me usually make time in our lives to support our communities and our interests to make these shows, and our most reliable source of income for this work is in fact crowdfunding. In my case, it's my Patreon. So if you'd like to receive ad-free episodes earlier than everyone else, regular newsletters and blog posts, bonus audio content, and support my work, quite literally, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol today. Thank you so much for listening to this excerpt from a recent episode of Creative Control with Vish Khanna. Every other Creative Control episode is only accessible to Patreon supporters. This is one of them. So please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol and become a subscriber today, and you won't miss a single episode in its entirety. There are links in the show notes to take you right there. So if you're able to, please do support this show. And enjoy hours and hours of conversation. Thank you.